Okay, here we are. It is 6 p.m. Utility District. Can we get a roll call, please?
Director Morrell?
Here.
Director Randall?
Here.
Director Bender?
Here.
Vice President Laliotis?
Here.
President Finn?
Here. Thank you. Pledge of Allegiance. Director Laliotis, would you like to?
Sure.
lead us in that?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Brian, do we have any changes to the agenda tonight?
We do have a couple of small changes we'd like to propose to move workshop items number 12 and 13. We have public in the audience that we anticipate public comment, and for the interest of everyone's time, move 12 and 13 to take place immediately following the consent calendar.
Okay. Got it. Thank you. Which brings us to, actually, do you have a GM update? I'm going to do that before director updates.
Yeah,
It's not, but he has one.
we typically don't do department updates on the second meeting of the month. We kind of focus on workshops and other items. I just wanted to make the community, the public, and the board aware that we were notified in our meetings with NV Energy and Liberty Energy and some of our wildfire mitigation group, our working groups, that there is the potential for PSOM power outages in the NV Energy service territory. They're not anticipated to affect or impact the Truckee service territory, but they do have areas that they're anticipating reaching their thresholds this weekend. And so they're in that kind of 72, 48-hour notice window for the foothill regions of their service territory. So we do have staff that live in that area and some of our business partners that may commute from Reno. Like I said, we don't anticipate it impacting our service territory, but that could change, and we'll keep everyone abreast of any new information.
Great. Summer's here. Thank you. Okay, which moves us to director updates. Do we have any director updates this evening? None to the left? No. To the right? No.
Last 2 days, I attended Pamela Hurt and Associates, Pam Hobday's Adaptive Leadership webinar, or not seminar, excuse me, workshop. And it was 2 thumbs up, awesome, super productive, and walk away with tools and action items to just help be a more effective, adaptive leader where you come across very difficult decisions and tools to help get through those and make those decisions, because here at the PUD, we need to make decisions and move forward. So it was super effective. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bender. We'll have to have a coffee.
Yes, absolutely.
Pick your brain about that. Director Randall? Okay. I also have no updates tonight, which brings us to our first big event, our public hearing. We have a public hearing to adopt the Martis Valley Groundwater Management Plan. So we're going to put our regular meeting aside for the moment and open the public hearing. I believe we have a presentation.
All right. Good evening, President Bender and members. Good evening, President Finn and members of the public hearing number 7. I do have a presentation that I put together that I could provide before we take public comment, if you like. Okay.
Commenting on.
Great, thank you. So the district has a long history of stewardship, management, and scientific work in the Martis Valley groundwater basin. We collaboratively developed the Martis Valley Groundwater Management Plan in 2013, and that was with Placer County Water Agency and North Star Community Services District. Talk a little bit about that effort as it sets the table for where we are today. It was actually a very interesting time. The federal government was doing studies of the nation's water supply, and part of that was the Truckee River Basin study. We were asked to be part of that effort, and the district and our partners put $250,000 in 2013. That was matched by federal money for a Desert Research Institute groundwater model of the Martis Valley Groundwater Basin. That included a climate change overlay and study to the end of the century, and also $250,000 of Lawrence Livermore National Labs radioisotope aging study, all of which greatly informed the groundwater model and the projections and how we view the basin. Talk a little bit about what a GMP is, Groundwater Management Plan. It's a multi-agency framework to ensure long-term quality and availability of water supply. It reflects current water resource planning and alignment of groundwater policy. We'll come back to these, but in the 2013 GMP, we established basin management objectives, and they really form the kind of basis of the groundwater management plan, and underneath those objectives are actions that direct the activities of the local water agencies. I won't read them all, but the last two are, most important, I think, for our community. Pursue and use the best available science and technology to inform the decision-making process. We like it to be data-driven, and we bring in experts to help us with that. And then consider the environment and participate in stewardship of groundwater resources. We had just adopted the groundwater management plan in 2013 when the state of California passed the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, affectionately known as SGMA. It replaced GMPs for medium and high priority basins, and at the time, the Martis Valley was designated medium priority by Department of Water Resources. It did halt implementation of the GMP, and it kicked off a collaborative effort to comply with SGMA between the three local water agencies, but also the town of Truckee, Placer County, and Nevada County. That effort led to a compliance project which ended in a alternative submittal, was a compliance path to SGMA, and that was submitted in 2016. And it certified that the basin had been operated within its sustainable yield for a period of at least 10 years. It was 20 years that they were able to document that. While DWR was reviewing our alternative submittal, they had 2 years to do it. They hadn't responded after 2 years. Department of Water Resource did a basin reprioritization effort, and the local water agencies, understanding the implications, sorry about that, of this effort, engaged heavily, and we found that they had a lot of inaccurate data and assumptions that didn't hold. And out of that effort, the Martis Valley Groundwater Basin was reprioritized to very low, which we think is appropriate, no longer subject to SGMA. The local SGMA agencies, the 3 entitlement and the 3 water agencies, agreed that that was appropriate, and we agreed to withdraw the alternative submittal. The local water agencies then said, well, we still need to steward and manage the basin. We think the GMP was an appropriate framework and planning process, so we voluntarily decided to rekindle that effort. So we kind of reset the clock from 2013 to 2019 on the GMP. We documented significant changes since 2013, including the significant amount of science that had happened and the alternative submittal and the annual monitoring reports that went along with that. It set the timetable for the annual reports and the updates. We did the annual reports every year since then, held stakeholder working group meetings, and brought in our expert hydrogeologic consultant to talk directly to the stakeholders. And we then hit the 5-year mark where the plan called for an update, which is what we're here to talk about tonight. So monitoring is really, at the core of a GMP and really informs the local water agencies on the health of the groundwater basin and on, the response to pumping into precipitation. We had historically monitored only twice a year, spring and fall. In 2017, the local water agencies voluntarily went to a monthly monitoring regime, which allowed us to start to build a much more robust data set and also start to look at some seasonality considerations and get a better understanding of what happens to the basin year round. We continue to do that and will continue to do that. 2012 to 16 was a big drought, if you remember. And then 17 was a wet year, and what we've seen is the basin responds primarily to precipitation and responds very quickly after dry years to wet years in terms of stable groundwater levels. Again, we had wetter years in 22 and 23. And the annual reports and the conclusions of our consultants have generally been that the basin is well managed and sustainable. So we get to the next steps on the GMP, and again the monitoring, collaboration, and working with 3 water agencies and our partners. So these are the basin management objectives that exist. And when I say monitoring, I do want to be clear, that's groundwater level monitoring, which is what we're talking about, which is, an important tool in understanding how a basin is responding. And again, those are the 6 BMOs that were in the original plan and which generally we believe are adequate along with the actions below them with only minor changes. So section 3.1.1 of the GMP states that the GM partners will develop and implement a summary report every 5 years. And it lists what should be in there: summary of monitoring results with a discussion of historical trends, summary of management actions during the period covered by that report. Those are the actions under each basin management objective. Discussion of whether actions are achieving progress towards meeting the BMOs, summary of proposed management actions for the future, a summary of any GMP changes that occurred during the period, and then actions to coordinate with other water and land agencies and other government agencies, and then recommendation of updates and changes to the GMP. So that's the process we've gone through. In 24, the district, in partnership with Northstar CSD and PCWA, issued a request for proposal for the update and the annual water report that went along with it. And out of that effort, the board awarded a contract to GEI Consultants. So we published the RFP, we shared it with known vendors, and then we awarded. The scope of work included the water year 23 annual report and the GMP 5-year update, and we included 1 stakeholder working group meeting and 1 public meeting. The board did award the contract in April of 2024 for a little less than $105,000 plus a 10% change order authorization. GEI partners worked, the GMP partners worked with GEI on execution of the water year annual report and the 5-year update. GEI reviewed the public process and notification requirements for updating the GMI when they got to the GMP update part, And we recognize that DWR did recommend a public process and notification that included 2 public hearings, notifications, publications in the local news outlets. And in the spirit of open and transparency, we decided to undertake that. It kind of set us back in that, there's steps in there. But we thought it was the appropriate step to take, so we did it. And on January 15th of this year, the board took action to set a public hearing for the intent to update the updated, so that bullet's wrong, the Martis Valley Groundwater Management Plan. Slide was in the staff report, and I know it's a little busy, but it lays out all the actions that we took. January 15th, we took action to set a public hearing for February for the intent to update. We published in the Sierra Sun twice as required. On February 5th, the board held the public meeting and took action and adopted a resolution of the intent to update the GMP. That was then published as required twice in the Sierra Sun. We finalized the drafts of the GMP update in the annual report after that hearing. On May 21st, the board took action to set a public hearing for the intent to adopt an updated GMP. We published that in the Sierra Sun. On June 3rd, we did hold our stakeholder working group and public meetings. And then early June, based on the feedback that we received, we finalized the annual report and the 5-year update. And then tonight, we're holding the public hearing to receive public comment and then the action to update. And then once completed, we would provide everything to DWR as required. We've completed the communications and the actions. Stakeholder and public meetings were held on June 3rd. Stakeholders were provided draft reports on May 23rd, so we wanted to give as much time as we could for them to be able to review that prior to entering the meetings. We did do direct email invitations to the stakeholder working group members, and for the public meetings, we promoted with direct customer email from us and North Star CSD, so that's 16 or 17,000 total emails. Did a joint press release that was picked up by the Sierra Sun and Digital Outreach, and the final documents and the resolution to adopt the GMP were included in the staff report and are the subject of tonight's public hearing. I'm going to go a little bit into the actual consultant's report, and this is these slides were taken directly from what was presented at the stakeholder working group meetings and at the public meetings. I will note that we brought in GEI consultants, and they gave this presentation because they're the experts and it's their work. I'm going to breeze through them a little bit to give you a flavor for it, but again, I'm not the expert here to really say what's going on here, and that was the purpose of the stakeholder and public meetings. So that is the groundwater basin in red there. And to be clear, the basin is really defined by the groundwater. There's a much larger watershed that feeds that basin, but for groundwater management and for basins, that's the focus. For monitoring locations, and again, that monthly monitoring is incredibly important in the past and going forward. We have 13 monitoring wells, groundwater levels is what we're monitoring. And then we have 21 municipal supply wells where we do metered extraction, and you'll see some graphs on how much water the local water agencies are using. Here is a view of the monitoring network. 13, one northern, one east, one western, one southern, and 9 in the central portion where the majority of the wells are located. GEI Consultants has in every report stated that they believe the monitoring network is adequate to characterize the basin and to make it, look at information going forward. As I said earlier, the main conclusion has been that, pumping's a small fraction of what goes on in the basin, and the dominant factor in groundwater levels is precipitation and climate. And so one of the things that's very important is for any given year to understand, was it wet, normal, dry, and, you would expect certain things to happen in a wet year and certain things to happen in a dry year. And so this lays out, since 1904, annual precipitation. As you can see, it varies a lot. There's an average in there, but we know in trucking, average never really means much. It tends to be up or down. And so this is incredibly important in feeding into their analysis and modeling of the basin. This graph is monthly pumping totals, historical. The district is the upper boundary, and we are the largest pumper in the basin. North Star is in green there. And total, we're pumping 7,000 acre feet a year. Sustainable yield's been defined at 24,000 acre feet a year. The basin's bowl, so to speak, storage is about 500,000, and you have anywhere from 400,000 to 1.5 million plus acre feet flow through the basin in a given year. So this is changes in groundwater elevations, and we're looking for a chronic lowering of groundwater. That triggers more investigation. And what we've seen is that groundwater is generally stable and it responds to precipitation, but there is no chronic lowering. In this graph, you can see the numbers are in feet of change in groundwater elevation, and almost all of them are in the single digits or low single digits, with the exception of one that's the bullseye in the middle, and our GEI consultant explained that it was a 20-foot drop, 23-foot drop. However, the previous year's measurement was 23 feet above the historic high, and so they believe that was a measurement error. And that was explained by them during the meetings last month or earlier this month. And then they also look at estimated groundwater storage and how much is in there in any given year. And again, you see it goes up and down, and on the bottom there, those dots reflect a wet, a normal, or a dry year. And you see on wet years it goes up, and on dry years it goes down. But generally speaking, that's a straight line across horizontally, which is what you want to see. This slide's busy, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but that are the historic groundwater levels as monitored monthly. And you see that the data starts to go up and down a lot more around 17, 18, 19, and that's when we fully implemented the monthly monitoring. But again, the key thing here is we expect the basin to go up and down with precipitation and with pumping to a lesser extent. But the key things is at the end of the day, those lines are generally horizontal, which would indicate no decline, chronic decline of groundwater levels. If they were going down at an angle, that would be cause for us to wonder what was going on and do more investigation. And again, at the bottom, they correspond the dry, wet, and normal years, and the bumps tend to correspond directly with that. So fiscal impact, there is no fiscal impact associated with adoption of Resolution 2015-15. There has been significant expense in both direct consulting dollars and then staff time to execute the annual reports and then the updates. We split that equally with our partners, and so I want to acknowledge North Star CSD and PCWA for the good, the great partners that they are. And for this update, our cost share is roughly a little less than $40,000. And the recommendation is to conduct the public hearing for consideration of adopting the updated Martis Valley Groundwater Management Plan and adopt Resolution 2025-15 to adopt the updated Martis Valley Groundwater Management Plan. And in the staff report, it did note in substantially the same form to allow for any last-minute edits or formatting typos type stuff as we complete this process. And with that, I'll pass it to President Finn.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for that little history of where we are and recap of where we are. I guess where we've been and where we are. There we go. So now I'm happy to open it up to public comments. I see Richard. I've read your comments, but I'm happy to hear it from the horse's mouth.
Thank you, President Finn. I appreciate the opportunity. The comments of the Truckee River chapter of Trout Unlimited to. I won't go into what Trout Unlimited does. It should be obvious. We protect, enhance, restore trout fisheries. And we, in our chapter is based here in the Truckee area, or in Truckee itself, and our focus is more or less from the lake up into Sierra County. Just in terms of background, I'm not going to get into a point-by-point discussion of Stephen's thorough presentation, but our concern is simply not the overall lowering, seasonal lowering of the aquifer. It's localized lowering of the aquifer, where it might have an impact on groundwater-dependent ecosystems and on surface waters. And there are 3 wells where there has been lowering over the recent historical past that indicate a troubling trend, which correlates strongly with land development. It's hard to draw causality because there could be other things happening. Faults, for example, have been raised by GEI. But GEI did note that there was a substantial decline in water table and north of the Truckee River, and this is the year 2021 annual report, which indicated that pumping was in fact drawing water from the Truckee River, which is disturbing. But the 3 wells of interest to us, or which indicate to us that there may be an issue: Fiberboard, Prosser Village, and B00M1, which is at the south end of Martis Valley. There may be other areas where there are seasonal depressions that are caused by pumping, but we just don't know, unfortunately. But I didn't come here to discuss those points. I came here to make 3 recommendations for the document. And by the way, I'm surprised to learn that it was finalized after the June meeting, just because that was the only meeting, and I had asked, when should comment be provided, and was given no firm deadline. So our 3 comments. Well, to boil down the document which we sent you, our 3 comments are: please modify the plan so that in the future stakeholders are brought into the process early and not at the end of the planning process. All of us are caught off guard at the rapidity with which this document was presented, and we had no input or no ability to provide input early on. It all happened at the end, and clearly, at least in our case, it was almost impossible to get comments in. Well, actually, it was impossible to get comments in at that June hearing, because there wasn't enough time to review it. So we recommend that the document be modified to ensure that the process includes early notification of stakeholders, direct notification of stakeholders, so that they're aware of what's going on and can assist the water agencies with regard to updating the plan. Our second recommendation is to improve the accuracy, veracity, and utility of the document. There are a number of small but important edits that we feel should be made to the context section of the plan, and I'm sure you read them. It's small stuff, easy to overlook, but it's stuff which we think adds to the document in terms of in terms of letting people know what the picture is, the broader picture with regard to the groundwater basin. And finally, we recommend that the document include a statement which affirms, or which presents a goal, basically, which is to affirm that a goal of the district is to protect groundwater-dependent ecosystems, surface waters, and their aquatic and habitats, benthic or aquatic insects and fish. There's and in so doing, it would implement or help implement Objective 5 of your district code. So which reads, manage the district in an environmentally sound manner. So this is a way to better bring the issue of surface waters and wetlands and such into the plan. They're basically invisible right now. We're not in the plan, and it also conforms with the Objective 5 of your district code. Anyway, that's it. I mean, I didn't plan to do a long presentation. This actually was a little longer than I was anticipating. So, but thank you for listening.
Specificity and comments like that. So thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us. And now we will bring it back to the board for discussion and thoughts. And
President Finn?
yes,
I would like to just acknowledge that the board did receive and was distributed public comments from Mountain Area Preservation, MAP, and the Truckee River Watershed Council. Those have been provided to the board for your review as well.
thank you for reminding me to include that. And I did read both of those comments as well, of course. So having all of that 360 degrees of comment. Now back to the board. I see that Director Randall has his.
How is the plan administered? And when I ask that, is there a lead agency that takes the lead?
The plan is implemented collaboratively. The district took the lead on contracting for the annual reports and for the update. North Star CSD and Truckee Donner PUD are the lead for reporting our monthly monitoring results to the state of California through a program called CASGEM. And then the three local water agencies meet collaboratively periodically throughout the year to talk about what's going on in the basin. But the annual monitoring report is really that major check-in where we bring in the stakeholders, we bring in the experts, and we look at what's going on.
Okay, and then in terms of the financial output, is staff time included in your calculations? You said the district spent approximately $40,000.
No,
So
that was just direct consulting costs.
that's what I thought. So staff time is not a consideration. It's whoever does what they do.
Staff time's a consideration in our budgeting, in how we allocate our time through the budget, and each agency has budgeted the appropriate amount to do the work we need to do.
Okay. And then I just would like to react to Richard's comment about stakeholder input, and for future, please make note that we need to do, make sure that happens.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Randall. Director Bender.
Hey, there we go.
Green light came on.
Going
Green
green.
light. Yeah, I like it.
Green for go. Just to carry on, Richard, thanks again for your comments, and just sounds like, a minor adjustment to our structure for the GMP, just to ping more stakeholders a little earlier on. I don't see an issue with that. I got Director Randall on board, and I think the other directors might be thumbs up on that as well. I don't see, I looked over the edits, please review those. I don't know the roadmap moving forward, how to I don't know, can we adopt it tonight, or do we need to punt on adopting it tonight to include these edits?
I think that depends on where the board comes down. If we want to make edits, I don't believe we can adopt it tonight, but we would be adopting it probably at the next meeting, depending on,
Yeah, one of my recommendations would be if the board's feedback and guidance to staff is to implement some of the procedural recommendations in the public comment and that we've discussed, the action this evening, much like the action taken by North Star Community Services District, was to adopt the plan in substantially the form presented, and we could make those administrative edits in terms of procedural and administrative approach. Staff agrees with the recommended adjustments by Mr. Anderson in terms of the procedural, getting the stakeholders involved and included earlier on in the process. We can make those edits. They're not material to the actual study report, and North Star, our partners, agrees with that as well.
And then let me just clarify, does that, the structural structure of the process, but does that include the couple last pages of Richard's comments and maps? You know, I mean, they had some pretty specific, can we include those or no?
My recommendation is that the recommended edits in terms of the determinations out of the study the study was conducted by a licensed certified hydrogeologist, our consultant. And so the study and the findings in that study and the report are the product of that GEI consultant study. Staff would not be comfortable making those edits or revisions without going back to the Martis Valley Groundwater Management Group and our consultant, and it may require additional work and study. The recommendations are to edit the determinations and finding of our certified professional. That would be something we would not be comfortable moving forward with this evening. It's something we could take under recommendation for the next study or the next report development, but if that is something the board would like staff to revisit, it would require us to potentially extend the contract with GEI and re-engage with the Martis Valley Groundwater Group.
Yes, I agree. We're gonna
and
pin that.
is that the,
Oh,
do you
yeah,
have more
yeah.
to add? Okay.
No, not
I
at the
didn't wanna
moment.
cut you
Yeah.
off.
Nope.
Based on that comment, is there a time frame, or time deadline that this has to be completed by?
There's a couple of regulatory guidelines. Remember the GMP effort with the Martis Valley Groundwater Management Group is what they categorize as a voluntary GMP. And so there are specific provisions under the state DWR guidelines on adoption of that plan. And that's what we're doing this evening. Once the board holds a public hearing, they have 35 days to either adopt or not that GMP. Following the initial intent to revise the GMP, which was adopted in the previous resolution back in February, you have 2 years from that public hearing to complete and adopt your groundwater management plan. Because we're having this hearing this evening, the board would have 35 days to make a determination and edits based on public comment.
And then 2 years to finalize.
No,
No, this is it.
we would, if you want to go that route of re-evaluating the report in GEI, my recommendation would be to not approve or adopt the report this evening and direct staff to go reconvene with the groundwater basin management partners and possibly re-engage a contract extension and further study and deliberation with GEI. At this point, GEI's study is complete and the report has been submitted for approval.
Understanding. It's all coming clear. Comments from Director Laliotis?
Yeah, so I think so far we have board consensus that, we definitely have some tweaks to make in the process. And I guess my opinion is that the recommended changes are not
critical enough for me to put a stop to this process. I think, this board is willing to make the recommendation and to assure our stakeholders that that we will approach this in a different way at the next update, such that all of your concerns are brought forth at the beginning of the process. And they're talked about, the consultant is there, all the stakeholders are there, everyone has some sort of consensus on, because somewhat changing the direction and what's in this, what the goal is, adding those layers to it. I'm not for it or against it. I just think it needs to be brought up as part of the stakeholder process and understanding that, yes, this report should start to touch on some of these other topics. Or if the consensus of the stakeholders is no, then it's time to move on. So I'm comfortable moving forward tonight with this process, with adopting the resolution in substantial conformance. We can make some minor tweaks here and there, but I feel strongly that we can reconvene at the next annual update and really, make sure that you and other stakeholders have the opportunity to really throw your concerns on the table early, and that the stakeholders can come to consensus on what, aside from what's already been done, what could be done in the future to make this report even better. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Director Laliotis. Director Morrell?
Can you go back to slide, it said new information. It was sort of the timeline of the communication process. I think it was, there we go. Whoop. Yeah, that's fine. That works. Okay. My first comment is Stephen, when you first started your presentation, that this is public hearing number 7. So this is not it's toward the end, but it's not the beginning. We've been talking about this for 6 months, looking at the schedule here. My question is, our partnering GMP partners, so that's Placer County and North Star, have they also been having public hearings as well in their agencies? And have they had a 6-month process like this also?
Yes, so the 3 agencies mirrored this process. North Star Community Services District held their public hearing this morning. They did adopt the plan in substantially the same form, and they directed staff to engage with the local water agency partners to consider the comments that were presented and to make the edits that are deemed appropriate.
Okay, great. So did they also promote in the Sierra Sun and some of those? Okay, so there were 3 different agencies who were all informing the public. Okay. And all of these meetings are open to the public, every board meeting that we have, to come in and comment at any time, correct, at the podium or in writing for the 6 months. So I just want to make sure that I was understanding that correctly. Okay. And then, did you attend the working group June 3rd? Were you there? Okay. And was it well attended?
We had 6 members about in the audience. Town of Truckee River Watershed Council, and then we had about that much online, which included Placer County, California Fish and Game, and a few others.
And as a working group, was there good dialogue back and forth, constructive? Did a lot of people come to the podium? Because I wasn't there, so I'm trying to get a feel for that June 3rd meeting.
The town had the largest representation in person, the mayor, the town manager, and another staff, and there was questions and dialogue. We didn't receive any direct comments or requested changes, but there was a robust discussion.
Okay, and that's kind of what I was wondering is were some of those requested changes. I agreed not to edit on the fly a document. I don't agree with that either. I think some time needs to be sat on that and to think that through. But I looking at this schedule and kind of hearing about some of the feelings that that some of the stakeholders were late to the game. There was lots of time for some of this feedback and written feedback and to get it into the groundwater management plan in a timely manner. So I'm just trying to understand the process a bit and the opportunities for comment to come at any time during that time. Let me see, I think that, and then to Tony's point too, going back to the consultants, that adds fiscal impact, right? Because it's going back, their project is done per the quote there up on the report. So going back, that's a different scope of work. And so that would that need to come back to the board again? Because it would be over a certain amount that we would need to do that?
We have some contingency allowance. I don't know if it's significant enough for the additional work. We do have, as you may note, this is for groundwater year 2023. And so this process typically would have taken place in the end of 2024, but we had some delays, intentional delays to make sure we got the public process correct through the adoption and the hearings. We plan to re-engage with a hydrologic consultant again for groundwater 2024, not in a comprehensive report, but just to continue to evaluate this. It would require us likely to come back to the board for additional authorization, as well as each of the other agencies. I also wanted to offer one point of clarification, and I think it was just because of the way when Mr. Ponce introduced it. This isn't the 7th public hearing. This was item number 7 this evening, the public
sorry.
hearing.
I was listening. Did you notice I was listening to what you're saying? Good listener.
This is the 2nd public hearing. The first public hearing was in February to notice our intent to update the GMP. This is public hearing number 2 to adopt.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I think that is it. And to your point, if we do any changes here, that affects the other agencies. And one agency has already adopted. So that sounds to me that causes a problem. Would that, if one is already adopted and if there are changes, so it's...
It would require at least North Star and the Truckee Downer Public Utility District to re-engage and kind of start the process over a little bit. Placer County hasn't held their final adoption public hearing yet, but so they would have a window to continue to revise and edit the GMP. But we would definitely need to re-engage as a group with GEI again.
Okay, I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Morrell. Well, it seems like I am in pretty significant alignment with Director Laliotis and Director Bender, well, all of the directors. I feel strongly that I can fully embrace the first set of recommendations that Mr. Anderson made about making sure that the public process is more accessible, more transparent, more, earlier on in the process to really make sure that we are, truly inviting people into the conversation. Going beyond the letter of the law, as it were. I think that it is important, for us to continue to expand our understanding of how the groundwater affects the surface water and vice versa. But I again understand that this is the groundwater management plan, and again acknowledging that there's obviously relationships there, but that may not be the scope of this plan either. I'm, comfortable adopting the plan as it is with those, again, that sort of process changes added at the beginning. As far as specificity for your second set of recommendations, I don't have the expertise, I don't think anybody on this board does, to analyze the sort of data that would require, like you said, that would require our experts to weigh in. And I think moving forward, the next one, we do this annually. This is the big review, but this is the 5-year, but we do this groundwater analysis and stakeholder meetings once a year. Is that not correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
We continue to monitor, as Mr. Ponce pointed out, on a monthly basis and review those monitoring. What is included in this update would be to extend the period for the comprehensive updates unless there are material findings in the annual reviews. So one of the things staff can do at the board's recommendation, incorporate those administrative and procedural changes. There's a provision that the agencies leading a GMP effort may assemble a technical advisory committee, and that would elevate it from a stakeholder sort of group to a technical advisory committee where we have established an MOU with the Truckee River Watershed Council. We can work with Trouts Unlimited and the other agencies out there for future incorporation earlier on in the process.
And I think that's where my mind was kind of going. I feel like we need to assemble some sort of surface water management group, which, you know, is not where our expertise here at the PUD lies. But I certainly think we could absolutely support in whatever ways that we can such an endeavor, right? We have a board initiative for holistic watershed health. We have, it is in our mission statement as well, that environmental stewardship is part of the PUD's mission. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for support and collaboration in this realm. Specifically adding those changes at this point in time to the GMP, I don't think that I would feel comfortable doing that. So that's where I fall. Does any? Yeah, please.
I think I'm a little confused in terms of adoption. You mentioned a 5-year window. Does it not come back for another 5 years in order to be able to provide input?
The plan itself does not get updated annually. And the recommendation in the report is that rather than a 5-year number, we use the monitoring results to trigger the review of the actual document, the GMP plan itself. And again, the meat of the GMP plan is those basin management objectives and the actions underneath them. And in the review of those from the 3 local water agencies and then through the stakeholder and public meetings, we did not get input on changing those or feeling that they were inadequate. And the partners feel as a planning document, this is a good document and it guides our efforts all year long.
So from, say, like Richard's group to provide input, does that have to wait 5 years, or is that something that could be done in the next year's review?
We could certainly engage and have those discussions. I believe North Star sent them, directed staff to, they adopted in substantially the same form. There is not alignment between the groundwater agency view of the scope and scale of a GMP and what Trout Unlimited is asking for is much more in the realm of SGMA and the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. That's not a regulatory obligation that the state has put on us at this point. So we really look at those groundwater monitoring and groundwater levels. And if there's not a chronic decline, then from a groundwater basin and management point of view, that's what we're looking for.
If I might add, so I think this might help. I think I understand your question that annually the district engages in the monitoring and evaluating each year the data we collect on the groundwater levels, pumping levels, and kind of that math of the water balance calculus there. What we're looking at this evening is the update in the groundwater management plan, and that's the items that Stephen presented earlier with the BMOs and how we're going to approach it. What we're proposing this evening is that the plan itself doesn't have significant material changes. It's based on the data we've collected and the monitoring information we've reviewed with our hydrologic consultants, that there isn't any evidence of chronic decline or any issues that need additional attention in the context of GEI's study and report. The one provision we were looking for each of the governing boards to consider is, rather than just updating the plan every 5 years, set the window at 10 years, but unless something occurs, some other evidence or monitoring data that suggests some decline that we hadn't caught or that arrives over the next couple years, then we would come back and reevaluate the plan. We have new data, we have seen new trends, we'd come back and revise the plan. This evening, we're suggesting or recommending the plan continue as previously proposed, but we widen that window of planned review, still continuing the intensity and frequency of the monitoring of the basin.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
And I do think it is important to keep in mind that this is a plan. This is it is, plans change all the time. Like we do take in more information. We do make better decisions as we learn more over time, hopefully. And it is in this plan. I mean, we've got, I'm just looking right in front of me, 3.6, implementation actions that support BMO number 6, considering the environment, participate in stewardship of groundwater resources, which includes, managing the basin and minimizing impacts on the environment. And it has, a list of actions that we should be taking. And it includes looping in, however you want to think about it, our nonprofits, our other agencies, and making sure that we are fully participating in minimizing our negative impacts on the environment. So it is in the plan. Continue support and collaboration with local groups that identify, coordinate, or implement projects that support the overall sustainability of the Martis Valley groundwater basin ongoing. So, there are a lot of elements that are in the plan already. So the plan is not perfect. The plans rarely are, in my experience, but I think the substance of this plan shows that we are a well-managed, sustainable basin. We want to continue that. We don't want that to be taken as, it's a free-for-all, we're going to build a water park. No, that is not what is happening here. This is a snapshot in time of what the Martis Valley groundwater basin looks like. We are going to continue to pay close attention to the data as we get it, as methodologies continue to improve, as we understand more clearly the relationship between surface water and groundwater. That's the plan. So, do we have any more? Everybody feel like they have voiced their piece? I'm willing to entertain a motion. Yes. Council Gross.
There we go. Just a couple of thoughts first. You might want to close the public hearing before we accept a motion. Second, their resolution 2025-15, which is the resolution presented to you tonight, based on the conversation tonight and recommendation from staff, I'd recommend that if you're inclined to adopt it, that we amend number 1 in that resolution that currently states, the district hereby adopts the updated Martis Valley Groundwater Management Plan, by adding to the end of that sentence in substantially the form presented to this meeting. And that based on my understanding from the conversation, that there may be, or there would likely be some edits to the document that has been presented tonight to incorporate some of the recommendations from Trout Unlimited with respect to the procedural notifications, but those edits would be made in cooperation with and consensus with North Star Community Services District and Placer County Water Agency, such that the edits may not be precisely the language requested by Trout Unlimited. And in full disclosure, I am a member of this chapter of Trout Unlimited, but I have not participated in or in the preparation of their comments.
Thank you for that. That was actually really important, that we are not going to adopt it as it stands. We do want those changes to be made. So Thank you.
And I have just a question, just to make sure I understood what you're saying. So when you're saying edits, that's not edits to the plan itself, because it sounds like we would need to bring in consultants because staff is not comfortable with that. So it's edits more so in the communication plan and process going forward, correct?
No.
Is that-
It would
no.
be edits to the plan itself, but with respect to the procedural notice of stakeholders. So that would be an edit to the plan, but those are the only edits that we've discussed tonight that it sounds like the board and staff would be comfortable making, but not addressing in the report itself the other two recommendations from Trout Unlimited.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Clear? Are we all comfortable and clear with how things stand at the moment? Crystal, okay, okay. Is that, okay, okay. In which case? Does anybody want to, does anyone want to make a motion?
Don't we approve the resolution? Oh, Steve, Mr. Gross requested you, did you close?
Oh, I still haven't closed the public hearing. Okay, I officially am closing this public hearing. It's closed. Okay, now we can continue on with our business.
So I'm happy to make the motion, and I'm not sure if I'm going to have the language correct. So I move to adopt Resolution 2025-15 to adopt the updated Martis Valley Groundwater Management Plan with the language to I know I'm not going to say this right. Involving the stakeholders earlier in the communication process. No, that's not right. I knew I wasn't going to say that right.
I always like to pull a Laliotis on this.
Yeah.
And we refer that to as you could move Mr. Gross's
Oh, okay.
additional comments.
You can move approval of the resolution with the changes recommended by council.
I moved the resolution 2025 with council's recommended language.
Thank you. And I think
Good enough?
I think it should be clear because I did state with precision my recommended change to number 1.
You did, and I did not do a good job of reciting it, so thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes. Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate your input and help and guidance. Okay. All sorts of good things. Okay, so that brings us to our next item this evening is the consent calendar. Do we have any public comment on consent? Seeing none, do we have any director questions, comments, consent situations? All right, I don't see any. Does anybody have a motion?
I'll move the consent calendar as presented.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? The motion passes. Right on. That brings us to our first workshop. We are changing our order of events slightly. So this is item number 12, which is updates in preemptive power shutoff policy development. So we are going to hear a presentation and public comment and discuss. Welcome.
President Flynn, members of the board. Mike Swanson, Electric Engineering and Operations Director. Presenting workshop item number 12, which again is the preemptive power shutoff plan development. Before I move on to this first slide, tonight I'm going to discuss the threat, the history, what our peers are doing, what we are planning, what we need, why we need a plan, how we plan to execute, and the support we need moving forward. So as far as the threat goes, I think we all understand where we live and we are in a high fire danger area. It's due to the increasing vulnerability to catastrophic wildfires due to a combination of high temperatures, strong winds, periodic drought conditions, and densely forested land. You might all remember the Caldor fire in 2021. the mosquito fire in 2022, and the effects they had on the community and the surrounding communities around us. Public health, smoke, evacuations. I wasn't here, but I could only imagine that traffic was horrible and the breathing conditions were not great at all. Wildfires caused by utility equipment have led to billions of dollars in damages and tragic loss of life statewide. Staff is committed to reduce the risk of district facilities becoming the source of the next catastrophic wildfire in California through wildfire mitigation efforts. I've spoke to some of these in at previous board meetings. It's implementation of proactive operational strategy during periods of elevated risk. Some of those proactive operational strategy include setting our equipment to non-reclose, so it doesn't operate should a fault occur. It doesn't operate a second time, I should say. It opens and that's it. Fast trip settings, which you guys will all hear in a future board meeting. And then the topic tonight is preemptive power shutoff. The board has done an outstanding job providing the funding to do vegetation management, overhead line clearing, and then our recent transition to utility steel poles, composite cross arms, and covered conductors. All right, now let's talk a little bit about the history. In 1990, this is a list of utility-caused wildfires. It does not include every wildfire that was caused by utility in the Pacific Northwest, but it's a good majority of them. Is what prompted all this is 1999, the Pendola fire. It resulted in a $14.75 million settlement with the U.S. Forest Service. That fire, those settlement was not the result of inverse condemnation, which we'll talk about here shortly, but it was the fire prior to inverse condemnation coming into play for utilities. Next highlighted fire is the Camp Fire. Horrible event. 85 people perished as a result of that event. $13.5 billion settlement. The utility pleaded guilty to 84 counts of involuntary manslaughter. You'll notice the difference there of one. They could not conclude that that one death was an actual result of the fire, but it is counted in the death toll. You'll see that the two fires preceding that were also part of that $13.5 billion settlement. 2019, the Kincaid fire in Sonoma County, $125 million CPUC penalty, $55 million settlement with the counties. And then the Lahaina fire on Maui. Unfortunately, 102 people lost their lives during that fire. A $1.99, nearly $2 billion settlement, and it's part of a $4 billion agreement. We also have the Southern California Edison fires that took, my apologies. The Southern California fires that took place earlier this year. Those are still under investigation. It appears that one utility says they are the likely cause, and then the estimated liability for just one of those fires is $10 billion. So I mentioned inverse condemnation, so I'd like to read a little bit about inverse condemnation and what the doctrine states. Inverse condemnation is a legal doctrine in California that holds utilities strictly liable when their infrastructure causes damage to private property, even if the utility was not negligent, complied with all applicable laws, rules, and safety regulations. So, a quick example of that, a tree top breaks out 40 foot from power lines, blows into energized lines, the utility is responsible. what does that mean for us? We know it's applied to IOUs. California courts have held that publicly owned utilities such as PUDs, municipals, and irrigation districts can be held liable under inverse condemnation if their facilities cause damage to private property. So unfortunately, we are no different than an IOU in this case. So let's talk a little bit about the current strategies of public utilities in general. Public utilities across the western U.S. are adopting wildfire mitigation strategies tailored to unique service areas and risks. Common approach includes infrastructure hardening, vegetation management, weather monitoring, and de-energization protocols. We're doing all but one of those so far. Members of the Northern California Public Power Agency, NCPA, including the district, are coordinating best practices to address shared wildfire threats. The NCPA supports a proactive, risk-based approach that emphasizes local decision-making, public communications, and operational readiness. Many public utilities have adopted or are in the development stage of a formal de-energization plan similar to the IOU's PSPS and PSOM plans used by large investor-owned utilities. Would also like to mention that those plans are either California Public Utility Commission or the Commission for Nevada, Public Utility Commission for Nevada, mandated for IOUs. So let's talk about our proposed strategies and things we're doing and things we plan to do. So from prevention standpoint, we're doing most of these. Vegetation management, inspections and patrols, wildfire mitigation efforts, that's the steel poles, the covered conductor. Detection, situational awareness. In future meetings, we'll be discussing some of the technologies that are out there that have come about as a result of the wildfires. Very good information can be provided to utilities about the state of their system. Industry expert support. So this has opened up, the wildfire has opened up a whole new market for industry experts when it comes to fire analysis as well as weather. Protection, non-reclose settings, I mentioned those earlier, fast trip settings, and of course the one we're talking about tonight, the preemptive power shutoff. So what is preemptive power shutoff? It is an absolute last resort strategy. It's not typically what we do as a utility is turn off the power. We typically are turning it on when something bad happens. This is all about turning it off before something bad happens. Protect the public. The purpose is protect the public safety by reducing the risk of utility-sparked wildfires or other significant risks. Of course, the method is to de-energize the electric grid. Trigger conditions implemented during periods of heightened wildfire risk or other significant risks. Brian mentioned what NV Energy is planning to do in parts of their service territory. Responsibility, this is where things differ a little bit from us from an IOU. We can manage this as a district, not be mandated to do it. Little busy slide, I apologize, just a little bit more on the background. So wildfire risk, the growing frequency and severity of wildfires in the regions pose a serious threat to public safety, infrastructure, electric reliability, and the environment. Regulatory expectations. Utilities across California and Nevada are expected to proactively plan for and respond to wildfire threats, including through de-energization strategies. Operational readiness. A documented plan ensures the district is prepared to respond quickly and effectively to events triggered by its own public safety. our PPS program, or by transmission providers' Public Safety Outage Management, PSOM, or the Public Safety Power Shutoff, if we were a transmission user from our partners to the west. Public communications and coordination. A formal plan supports timely and coordinated communication with customers, emergency services, and partner agencies during outage events. Customer safety and trust, transparency, and well-executed planning helps maintain public trust and ensures customers are informed, prepared, and protected. Business continuity, whether it's a PPSS, a PSOM, a PSPS plan, it's critical to maintain essential operations. Restoring service efficiently and minimizing disruption during wildfire-related power shutoffs. Transmission dependency, I mentioned that. As we all know, we're dependent on NV Energy's transmission lines. NV Energy operates under the PSOM plan. Weather conditions and burn index, as well as wildfire encroachment, can all lead to our facilities being de-energized. During high wildfire risk conditions, NV Energy may proactively de-energize transmission under this plan. PSOM events can impact district's ability to deliver electricity, even if no action is initiated by the district. As a result, customers may experience power outages beyond the district's control. Key objectives of a preemptive power shutoff plan. We have to ensure public safety. We have to ensure our employees' safety. This is all about coordination, cross-functional response. We have to engage CAL FIRE, the fire agencies, police agencies, everyone else involved. Provide timely and accurate public communications. I'll talk more about that here shortly. And restore power safely. Turning it off might be easy. Turning it on is a little more difficult. Our key to success is going to be customer notifications, communicating with the public. Power shutoffs may be initiated internally or externally. Regardless of the source, we have to keep our customers informed. Public safety, risk reduction, and again, maintaining that trust. So if approved, the district will activate incident command structure. This will ensure the safety, organized, and effective response. Key components include an incident commander, somebody who's in the lead. Defined roles for operations, logistics, planning, and communications. ICS is a scalable structure. So if it's a small event, if we're only impacting one portion of our service territory, we don't need to have a huge incident command team. We can have a smaller one. It expands and contracts. Coordination with external agencies, real-time documentation for accountability and post-event review. I found this to be very important to understand where you can make improvements event after event if they occur. So ICS enables the district to manage PPS events in line with emergency management best practices. So all of our partners, whether it's fire, police, they all are under an ICS structure, as well as our peer utilities. Support, I mentioned support a little earlier, and the new market that's opened up as a result of wildfires. To ensure that PPS is used appropriately and only when truly necessary, staff recognizes the need for expert support in evaluating weather and environmental factors to reduce wildfire risks. We're not weather experts, we're not fire experts. We understand how to operate the electric grid. We need help. District intends to engage a qualified consultant to provide localized weather forecasting, wildfire risk analysis, and grid vulnerability of our assets. Leverage expertise to make informed, data-driven decisions that prioritize public safety while minimizing unnecessary outages. This is a slide that NV Energy provided us when we met with them. And this is really helps understand the triggers for a PSOM or preemptive power shutoff or PSPS. It's all about wind, and it's about the burn index. It's about how dry our fuels are, how moist the air is, all those different factors factor into burn index. So as those go up, creates higher risk. You'll see the PSOM conditions. It's about fuel assessment, fire weather conditions. Is it going to cause a negative impact to the system? That's what triggers their PSOM event. So think about our activation triggers, as well as our partners. Criteria for activation triggers vary and are dependent on local conditions and the maturity of a de-energization plan. Our peers' methodology, NV Energy, they use what they call a composite risk index. It's basically burn index times wind speed square, wind gust squared, equals their composite index. Liberty looks at 30 to 45 mile an hour winds depending on their circuit, and the fire potential index, which is another calculation. They are very mature in how they deal with preemptive power shutoffs as compared to where we would be initially. We would take a stepped approach. Version 1, it's all about keeping it simple, right? We don't have the things in place like the NV Energies with the weather monitoring and all the other factors that they have. We looked at what their triggers would be, and we figured that 45 mile an hour gusts and a burn index greater than 85, we probably wouldn't be the first one to de-energize our customers. NV Energy would. Version 2 is about leveraging that weather and risk intelligence. And then version 3 is establishing zones. We are in a tier 3. 98% of our service territory is tier 3. If the CAL FIRE fire map is adopted by the California Public Utility Commission, which it appears it will be, I want to get us to a point, or staff wants to get us to a point where we establish zones based on the risk. If the wind's coming from the southwest, do we really need to de-energize our entire service territory? Maybe not. So our greatest wildfire risk timing is September through November. We have met with several weather and risk intelligent companies, and there's at least one of them that says we can get the information we need to make better decisions other than have version 1. We can get that by September. All right, so potential fire impacts. Insurance costs, escalation, or cancellation. Debt rating degradation. We may not be able to get the money that we need to get at the same interest rate we're getting it today. And of course, litigation exposure. You saw the slide number 3, tells it all. With that, the recommendation tonight is to provide input and direction to staff. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, President Finn.
Oh, thank you for a sobering presentation.
Sorry.
Right? It's all right. You're just the messenger. Shall we take public comment? Do you have any public comments? Arnie, I know you wrote one. I read it. Welcome to the discussion. Just tap, there's a red dot. There you go.
Oh,
You got
I'm
it.
trying to push the logo.
You did it.
That doesn't work. Anyway, good evening, board members. My name is Barney Dewey, and also to the staff. Okay, this was very technical, impressive, lots of issues. I'm going to just talk about one little thing here, and that's really my suggestion that we use the term PSPS, Public Safety Power Shutoff, for any preemptive power shutoff when we're doing communications to our customers. PSPS is the officially adopted term of the California Public Utilities Commission, of course, the CPUC, as established in decision D.19.05.042 in May of 2019. While, and this was pointed out tonight, TDPUD is a public-owned utility, it is not required to follow the CPUC requirements. However, it is strongly encouraged to adopt a power shutoff program, and I believe it's also encouraged to use the PSPS terminology. That term, PSPS, is widely used throughout California. That's the term that Cal OES uses. That is the term that Liberty Utilities, of course, which serves part of Glenshire, is required by law to use. That's what CAL FIRE uses, that's what Caltrans uses, and that's what the major media outlets use. We are in an area that is kind of strange, although we're town boundaries, believe it or not, between Truckee and Reno are only 8 miles. If you look on a map, we are in the Sacramento TV media market. And so therefore, most of the people, many of the people are going to be listening and watching to information from that market. I encourage the board and staff to adopt the PSPS term to minimize confusion for second homeowners, visitors, and also full-time residents, especially for us that do rely on the Sacramento area TV news. Consistent terminology is essential for clear communications. Recently, I was at the mailbox, and I ran into a neighbor that I know. He lives in the Stockton area and then lives up here during the summer. And we were talking about potential wildfires this year, and I mentioned that the local utility might consider using a different term for fire prevention-related shutoffs. His immediate reaction was, and I quote, "If they use any other term, I won't know what they're talking about." So I found that was interesting, the first thing he said, and really struck me to make these comments. Okay. Using the PSPS term as the primary term does not mean, of course, that we would not additionally refer to NV Energy's PSOM term, when it's appropriate. And I also think using a new third term like PPS may cause more confusion, not less. I may be wrong, but I believe this program is being developed, it was pretty well outlined tonight, but primarily for potential liability concerns because the CPUC has strongly encouraged POUs to adopt power shutoff programs. I believe it would be inconsistent to implement a program aligned with the CPUC guidance and then not use their designated term PSPS. My main and closing thought is that in today's litigation-prone environment, using inconsistent terminology could create avoidable risks for the TDPUD. Thanks.
Thank you for your thoughts. Thank you for sharing this evening. Okay. Board discussion. Workshop. I mean, this is a workshop, so we're just talking. We don't have any action to take tonight. Just if we have any thoughts or feedback for staff to consider moving forward. Director Bender.
WRPS? No, I'm just messing with you. Wildfire, I saw one more acronym to grab in there, Mike, so. Right. So, I'm not opposed to changing unless there's any unintended consequences you see in there.
Mr. Dewey's points are very well taken. It's something we need to take into consideration. As President Finn mentioned, there's no action tonight, and PPS was a placeholder just for purposes of discussion. I think Mr. Dewey's points and justifications and reasons behind that are well taken, eloquently stated, and there's stuff for us to consider there. One of the concerns we do have is that, as Mr. Dewey pointed out, PSPS is a regulatory construct of the PUC, and there's other provisions and requirements within that PSPS action. And so we've had some discussions in recent years with County of Nevada, the town of Truckee, and a little bit with Placer County, but mostly with Nevada County and the town of Truckee about those other provisions that are required under the PUC regulatory guidelines. The things that you hear that PG&E provide or some of the other investor-owned utilities provide during a PSPS de-energization event, there's other resources that they offer their ratepayers and community at a pretty significant cost. And so our only concern is not affirmative or negative in the recommendations. Like I said, it's well taken. We need to consider, one, as a POU, does that expose us to other conversations? Is that we've had pretty exhaustive conversations with Nevada County on whose responsibility it is for other emergency service provisions, housing provisions, subsistence provisions. We talk about those other things in the event that PSPS's or preemptive de-energizations take longer than that 8 to 12 hour window. Who's responsible for that? And so there's different regulatory requirements for the IOUs and there are POUs. And so while I agree that the continuity of language, it's fundamentally what makes things like the ICS work is continuity of language between different agencies. So it's something we need to evaluate. And before we bring back an action, we'll do some thorough research into this, and all points are valid.
I just have one. Barney, your friend, didn't understand anything other than PSPS. I recognize PSOM. I didn't even know what PSPS was. So, I mean, people are in tune to the acronyms they know, but they know what it means and the meaning and whatever the acronym is the follow-up action and what people do with that. So that's really, and that, of course, that's the information that follows. So, thank you.
Thank you. I just have a few, leaving the naming of it aside for the moment, but we had 3 different stages of it. I just want to say that I throw my weight behind being as discerning as possible, not level 1 where it's just gusts up to 45 and burn index over 85. I would like us to be as granular as possible before we take such a drastic step as turning off people's power. I think there's a lot. I think that's a very, very serious move with a lot of negative, potentially negative consequences, and understanding all the reasons that we would have to do that. But I think that it is really extreme, and we should be as, like I said, granular as possible before we make that decision, and really use the technology that we can access. Also understanding this is kind of a crummy atmosphere for, like, there's just cuts in a lot of, for example, weather services, and we may not have access to the information that we would want before making this decision. But, and as far as what we call it, we might want to have a townwide contest, because when I think of something that concerns me is PSPS is PG&E's territory is huge, and they call them in different areas of their territory, and none of that is ours. And I don't want people being like, we're going to have a PSPS, and we're not having a PSPS event. So, but again, we'll figure it out, right? I think we'll take in the information we need.
I have one more question. Can you go back to the slide that is talking about the criteria, the shutoff criteria? I think it's right there. When NV Energy cut power to all of Tahoe last August, what criteria was met? Was the fire already going then in Verdi?
I'm not familiar with
You're
that
not
fire,
familiar.
so I'm not prepared to answer. But, like I said, they do use a composite risk index. I believe they've been using that for a couple of years, if I understood our meeting with them correctly. Again, burn index times wind gust squared. So that's their trigger, is when that criteria is met, they're turning the power off. Now, like today, we're on a call with them, and there was discussions about that happening on maybe as soon as Friday. So they're starting to notify their customers at this point. So that's a critical piece in my mind, is to get out in front of this, make the public aware. Key piece is communications.
On those fires you mentioned, Director Morell, there's been a couple of events initiated by NV Energy over the last couple of years, and they've been driven by two primary factors. The one, I think it was last year, with the automobile fire down at the Gold Ranch exit or close there nearby. That de-energization was initiated by their encroachment or proximity policy. So anytime a wildfire designated as a fire out of control over a certain intensity that's within a certain proximity of any of their infrastructure or assets, they will de-energize for, again, reducing their infrastructure, further complicating that fire, or any confusion that they ignited it. So that's their proximity or encroachment policy. And then they've also triggered PSOM events in the Tahoe Basin, because much like Truckee, the eastern perimeter of Lake Tahoe is subject to transmission that passes through high wildfire risk areas in the foothills to the east of the Sierra Nevada. So that Carson-Minden, those foothill grass plains trees, once they hit those wind thresholds in a burn index, they have de-energized the South Lake area, much like we experienced here.
That's great clarification. So, because of when we're talking about power shutting off and communication, so that's really great. Thank you.
One more just quick. Has Liberty, they've adopted a PSOM plan. Have they ever engaged it? Do we know? Just okay.
Liberty, California utility, regulated by the CPUC, so the correct terminology would be PSPS in this case. They have had the program for numerous years as required by law and regulation. They have initiated de-energizations, not in our service territory or east of our service territory, where they serve the eastern portion of Glenshire. Most of their activity has been in that Genoa, kind of South Lake to the east portion, and then they go all the way down into Topaz and Markleyville, and they have initiated PSPSs down there.
Is Topaz? I thought Topaz was in Nevada.
It's all parts of Topaz. When you go past Topaz, you get back into California. So right on the lake there is
So
the
they're all
demarcation.
100% in California. None of their
Correct.
stuff. Okay, which would be crazy. Thank you. Okay, I don't. Does anybody have any more feedback that they would like to offer? Okay.
I wanted
Yeah.
to add one additional point, because that is, as you pointed out, President Finn, it's a change for us. It's a pivot. We've talked about this in previous summers and have for many years relied upon and have been reinforcing the fact that we enhanced infrastructure and tree trimmings and vegetation management is where our emphasis has been. In terms of a preemptive de-energization program, it serves two purposes for us. One, as Mr. Swanson pointed out, to avoid the risk of a Truckee Donner PUD ignited fire that causes significant damages. But two, it also gives our operators, our staff, very specific protocol to take action, as opposed to being subjective and kind of situational. And we don't want to put that burden on our operators to have made a wrong decision and to be second guessed in terms of what we felt was necessary to protect our community. There are case precedents where agencies and operators have been found liable, one, for not having a preemptive de-energization program, and two, not enacting it based on the conditions that existed. And so we want to make sure our staff is also protected, the district's protected, and our community's protected. This program, we can adjust the thresholds based on evolving circumstances and conditions. And as we continue to build out our system to be more fire resistant and more hardened, we can adjust those. But, as Mike pointed out earlier, the likelihood of us triggering this in advance of an NV Energy event is small, but we still need to have that tool in place for our team so they can make those decisions.
No, I understand the current landscape here with fire danger and again, insurance and liability and safety. It's a different world right now. And yeah, I think clearly very well defined. These are the parameters. There's no guesswork. There's no questions. It's when this happens, we do this. So I look forward to seeing the actual plan and hope that we never have to use it. Thank you. Oof. All right. Boy, all sorts of cheerful stuff tonight. Next up, now we have another workshop, item number 13 on our agenda, setting the stage for a net energy metering successor rate design. Statistics galore.
Good evening, President Finn, members of the board. Stephen Keats, I am a special projects administrator here at the district. I run our customer-facing sustainability programs, demand-side management, and then I also do fun data projects like this one. I'm here tonight to present a workshop on net energy metering rates. I'm going to get a stopwatch to make sure I don't go too long here. Because statistics are fun for me, but I realize that they're not so fun for everybody else. Tonight I'm here to present a workshop on net energy metering rates, specifically the state of the district's current net energy metering rate and the opportunity that is in front of us to discern how this rate's design can remain consistent with the district's mission and relevant to this community moving forward. There we go. It had to turn on. So the current net energy metering rate was actually established via ordinance back in 2008. So it's 17 years old. And that rate is actually predicated on a design that was put forth by the CPUC back in 1996, so 30 years ago. Lovingly known to the state of California as NEM 1.0. And that rate was designed to address the needs of the time, a time at which one would only find solar panels on off-grid cabins. These days, we find solar panels in the majority of communities across the state. And in fact, it's even mandated via Title 24 for solar panels to be installed on new construction, aside from a few exemptions here and there. The rate that we have currently in place, the design of that rate is actually mandated by the California Public Utilities Code. So we have to provide this rate in this form. And that mandate lasts up until the installed capacity of the customer rooftop solar exceeds 5% of our peak demand. So our peak demand for the system is right around 36 megawatts, which means that once we have about 1,800 megawatts, or sorry, kilowatts of customer PV installed, then we have exceeded that 5% threshold. Once we exceed that 5% threshold, we now have an opportunity because we're no longer constrained to the specific design laid out in the Public Utility Code. We now have the opportunity to decide for ourselves, what should that design look like moving forward. So let's talk really quick about what is that design. I think a lot of people probably heard of NEM 1.0, but just to make sure that we're all on the same page, the existing design essentially treats the grid as a virtual battery bank. Over the course of a year, a customer will generate electricity via their solar panels. Some of it's going to be used by their home, some of it's going to be exported out onto the grid. During the summertime, more of that is going to be exported out onto the grid than what their home is going to use. That excess then is recorded by us in our systems, and it's kind of put into their account as a credit. And then because in other months of the year, for example in the winter, their home is not going to generate as much electricity via their solar panels than their home is going to use. And during those months, then they're able to pull from the bank, the credit bank, to compensate for electricity that they would otherwise have to pay. So in this sort of paradigm, a kWh, or a unit of electricity that is exported out onto the grid by the customer, is valued equivalent or at retail rate to electricity that they import, right? So that means we're effectively purchasing electricity from our customers at the same rate that they buy it from us at. The nuance there is that at the very end of the year, we do what's called a true up. And our solar year goes from like May to April, so it's a little offset from the calendar year. But there's a true up that occurs that looks at their overall account. If they're a net generator at the end of the year, then we'll settle our accounts with them and we'll pay them a rate for that excess electricity over the course of that year. And the rate at which we pay for that last little vestige of electricity is actually are based on the monthly average non-firm energy cost, which is kind of a fancy term, but historically that's been around 7 cents a kWh. All right, before moving forward, just a quick note, housekeeping item, words matter. And I've observed as I've been preparing for this workshop and just monitoring conversations in general on this topic throughout the state and in media, there's a lot of conversation currently occurring on the topic of NEM 3.0. And I think it's important to note that NEM 2.0, NEM 3.0, that verbiage is actually specific to CPUC regulatory context. And we do not fall within that context. So none of the conversations that are currently occurring across the media, none of the conversations that are currently occurring between Governor Newsom and the CPUC, for example, really impact anything that we're talking about here tonight. We are separate from all of that. And because of that, I'm going to propose, and what I'm going to do through the rest of this workshop is that instead of using terms like NEM 1.0 and NEM 3.0, I'm going to start using the term customer generator because I think that clearly indicates what we're talking about without polluting the waters with all this other stuff that's really not applicable to our context. Okay, so rate design. All rate design starts first with cost of service. As a public utility, we are not for profit, which means that all of our rates are designed simply to recover the cost that we incur in order to provide services to our customers. Tonight's conversation is actually not about the cost of service analysis. That's a completely separate topic. What tonight's conversation is about is the rate design that comes following that cost of service analysis. The cost of service analysis takes a look at all of the costs that are incurred via the utility in order to provide services to our customers, and it breaks that down into different customer classes. The table to the right there shows the results from the last cost of service analysis that was done in 2023. And specifically, it pulls out the costs for residential primary and residential secondary customers, which in all of the plots and tables following are going to be abbreviated as P10 and S10. And the table at the bottom there kind of simplifies things to show that effectively the average revenues that we would need to collect from P10 and S10 customers respectively on average in order to cover the cost of serving that customer class. So a rate design fundamentally is simply looks at a customer, what we predict our customer's energy use is going to look like, and applies the rate numbers to that energy usage history to make sure that the revenues that come from that rate are equal to those numbers right there. And so that's what we've done here in the rates that we're going to discuss in this presentation. Okay, so this is where the statistics start. I tried to make things as concise as possible, but I realized that this is a very nuanced topic. So if I'm using any words or I'm glossing over any concepts that I might assume are general knowledge, feel free to stop me and ask me to clarify. So where we started with was the existing or the current net energy metering rate that we offer to our customers. Because we wanted to establish a baseline. How is the current existing rate doing? How is it performing? And what we'll do is we're going to actually start at the bottom, and then we're going to move our way up. The tables at the bottom basically compare what the current net energy metering rate collects, and compares it against what we would be required to collect in order to cover the cost of our service. And we can see based on just looking at those numbers, and don't worry about the far right table yet. We can see based on those numbers that the revenues collected exceed slightly the revenues that are required. And if we look up at the plots, the very bottom plot looks like a hockey stick, very colorful hockey stick, shows each individual customer in the NEM program, and it's not quite that. We took a sample, a statistically representative sample of customers. But we can effectively look at that and say, okay, that's the population. Those are our solar people. And it ranks them in terms of the amount of revenue that they are that we are collecting from them, from the folks that are providing the greatest amount of revenue to the folks that are providing the least amount of revenue. In fact, you can see a couple that we're paying at the end of the year. And that the line going across, fancy laser pointer, sweet. This horizontal line right here, that's the line that indicates the average revenues that we would need to collect, just kind of overall. In order to break even, in order to be revenue neutral. And you can see that, there's, as we would expect, there's some customers above it, some customers below it. What we need is that just on average, customers, it equals to that line. And that probably is better represented in the plot up here on the right, this histogram. It shows that the locus of customers are right here. And this revenue point, and here, this line, this vertical line right here, that's the same as this one right here. Right, so we can see like the average revenues that we're collecting are right here on the line, right where it needs to be. But there are a bunch, or sorry, not a bunch, a very small number, a handful of customers that actually make up the preponderance of the revenues collected. And that is that means that there's a lot of potential risk. Because if suddenly just a couple of these customers stop consuming electricity, let's say they decide to upsize their rooftop array to offset all that electricity, suddenly all that revenue disappears. And that's what this table down here looks at. It says, okay, what if we get rid of all of these guys over here? Then all of a sudden we find that we're barely scraping by with this rate. And as that trend continues, the revenues continue to go down. So while it's tempting, looking at those results, to conclude the current rate, it works, we're collecting the revenues we need, there are a couple of nuances there. The one that I just mentioned, which kind of looks at trends going forward, but there's another nuance, a head scratcher, so to speak, and that's this number right here, this 7,500. Turns out that our solar customers right now, our customer generators, are actually consuming, on average, almost 8,000 kWh a year in excess of what they are generating. To put that into context, if we compare our customer generators against their non-generator counterparts, we see that our generators are using the same amount of electricity annually from us as their non-generator counterparts, which is counterintuitive. Bit of a head scratcher. Intuitively, we expect for solar customers to use less electricity than their non-solar counterparts. Now, there's a lot going on baked into these numbers that we need to kind of flush out, because it turns out bigger homes use more electricity than smaller homes, right? And that's all kind of baked into this right now. So what we did is we applied a process called normalization to the data. And normalization basically just helps us to take apples and oranges and turn them into apples and apples. So a quick example for you. Given two customers, two different billing cycles, but we want to compare their monthly billing monthly billed usage, right? Based on this plot, this is just the raw billed usage, you would expect that, these guys use different amounts of electricity, and we'd be taken down the rabbit hole of trying to guess why. However, if we recognize that different billing periods have a different number of days associated in that billing cycle, we would realize that we really, in order to compare these two, we need to actually divide the monthly billed electricity by the number of days in that billing cycle so that we get kWh per day. And when we do that, we find out, they use the same exact amount of energy, right? So what we did is we did the same process to the solar generator data, but instead of using billing days, we used square footage of the home. So we normalized the data kWh per square foot. And we looked at, so first we had to figure out, how big are these homes? So the kind of four different plots here. The top two are P10 customers. The bottom two are the S10, so primary, secondary. And then the left side false, that's customers without generation. And the right side true are customers with generation. And the trends that we see in these plots are that customers without generation, the square footage of those homes tend to be smaller than the customers with generation. Similarly, P10 or primary customers are on average have smaller homes than secondary customers. So once we apply that data to the electricity use data, we end up with a number called kWh per square foot. And the results now start to become more intuitive, more in line with what we expect, because we find that customers with generation now use less electricity on a per square foot basis than customers that don't have generation. And when we look a little bit closer, so we not only looked at it at an annual level, but we zoomed way in, looked at it at an hourly level. So on the plot, again, the top is primary customers, the bottom is secondary customers, and now we look at the kind of the average hourly profile when people use energy throughout the day in quarters 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the year. And when we look at the top, we find that the customers without solar, the red line, use their patterns are pretty much the same as the customers with solar. The only difference is that little dip in the middle of the day when the solar panels are generating something, right? But on the ends of the day, everything's in alignment. Cool. On the bottom, though, we see the secondary customers. It's a slightly different story. In the winter time, which is also happens to be when we have the highest density of holidays, we see that at the beginning and end of the day, that it actually uses, the customers with solar use more electricity on a per square foot basis than the customers without. And we can kind of hypothesize, the data doesn't give us conclusive results as to why that is, but we can kind of hypothesize that it's likely increased occupancy rates and electrification, electric vehicles, for example, that are causing some of those differences. The other useful part of this particular study, and this is a number that we're going to kind of come back to later, is that we can use these numbers now, these normalized numbers, to figure out that on average, our primary customers have their solar arrays sized to compensate for about a third of their annual electricity loads. Similarly, for S10 customers, it's about 25%. Statistically speaking, they're pretty much the same number. It's about a third of their electricity use is offset by their solar arrays. So the conclusions from all of this, kind of tangent, if you will, customer generator homes are almost 1,000 square feet larger on average than non-customer generator homes. It's hard to really estimate the impact of post-COVID occupancy, electrifications, et cetera, but it indicates that there are definitely some impacts there. Likely, specifically electric vehicles are a significant contender there. And just kind of anecdotally through conversations that I've personally had with customers on solar, I've noted that a number of customers over the last year and a half have been inquiring about upsizing their arrays, which are no longer able to provide enough electricity for the homes because of recent purchases of electric vehicles. All of this indicates that the trend is towards we are expecting to see the existing solar arrays to be sized up, and for the that excess usage that I noted earlier, that 7,500 kWh, is going to decrease over time. And so what that happens is this big chunk, this is the same plot as earlier, this big chunk on the left is going to get pushed over to the right. And that's going to push down the revenues down below the minimum revenues required for this rate class. And if we fall underneath those lost monies, that missing money has to come from somewhere. And that somewhere is likely going to be increasing rates for everybody, right? And this is the cost shift that is discussed commonly in conversations about net energy metering. This is the genesis of that cost shift right here. So moving forward, what can we do? What would an appropriate or possible rate design look like for net energy metering? Well, let's take a quick assessment of what our objectives are. First and foremost, the objective is that the rate has to collect only the revenues required to provide that cost of service, right? We're revenue neutral, not for profit. In addition to that, we have an objective of accommodating increased saturation of distributed energy resources. So for example, batteries, rooftop solar, vehicle to grid, potentially in the future, because all of those are consistent with contemporary needs of the utility sector across the board, not just us here locally. Across the board, the utilities are now much more focused on peak demand and peak demand mitigation. And of course, the rates presented tonight here are not formal rates that we're presenting to be adopted. These are hypothetical rates, and anything that would come as a formal proposal would first go through an independent, outside expert, third party for validation. So as we move forward to talk about these hypothetical rate designs, I wanted to first note that a rate design does more than just collect revenue. No matter how a rate is designed, it's going to communicate something to the customers about the value of electricity. And there are many, in fact, there's an infinite ways of combining numbers to come up with that revenue figure at the end, right? So in some ways, it's almost more important to consider what are we communicating through the rate design than what is the actual number, because the numbers are going to fall where they fall. But the question is, what are we communicating through the rate design? I wanted to just quickly note that I'm going to probably use some terms here going forward, and I just wanted to define them really quick. When we talk about costs on the utility side, those kind of fall into two general bins: fixed and variable costs, right? Fixed costs being those that don't change based on how much electricity our customers do or don't use, and variable costs, conversely, do change based on the amount of electricity people are using. Commensurately, on the rate side, there's a flat component, like a monthly fixed charge, right? I'm going to try and use flat there so I don't mix it up with the fixed cost. And then there's a volumetric component to the rate, right? Based on cost per kWh that the customer is using. And when we combine the fixed and variable costs, that gives us our cost of service. And that cost of service is then recovered via the rate, and we can distribute that however we want, via on the flat component or the variable component. if we put all of our eggs in one basket, put them on the flat component, that's just one monthly rate, right, for our customers. They just pay that one charge every month, and that's it. What that communicates is that we don't care how much electricity they use. They can use a lot, they can use a little, just one monthly rate, right? Conversely, if we put all of it in the volumetric, now all of a sudden we say, yeah, it's really important to us how much electricity you use. And we're also subjecting ourselves to a significant amount of risk, because if everybody suddenly doesn't use any electricity, now we're left holding the basket. And we've not collected the amount of revenue that we thought we were going to collect. That's kind of an example of how rate design might communicate something to our customers. Now, consistent with the objectives discussed, where our contemporary needs are very much focused on not just how much electricity people are using, but when they are using that electricity. These two rate designs actually are predicated on our current time of use rate. And this particular one right here, and the numbers are over here on the right, and again, this is these are hypothetical numbers. This hypothetical rate, for example, keeps the monthly charge the same as what our current time of use rate is, $30.77 a month. So that's constant. And then it also keeps the peak and off-peak price of electricity that the customer consumes the same or consistent with our time of use rate. So we get some kind of consistency, right, across the rate schedule, consistent communication there. In this case, what we do is we play around with the numbers for what the value is of electricity that is sent back to the grid, sent back to us, that we're purchasing back from our customers. And what this does is it says, okay, during the peak period, we're going to set that value equal to and this number just is actually consistent with our non-time of use rate. And it's also consistent with our current net energy metering rate effectively, because our current net energy metering rate is effectively purchasing electricity back at retail rate, which is 18 cents, 18.6 cents for P10 and 21 cents for S10, right? So we're keeping that the same in this example. And then the off-peak value of electricity exported to the grid is adjusted in order to meet the revenue requirements in this example. And so we get a peak off-peak for both electricity that they consume and electricity that they export. In this case, we keep the kind of distribution of how much of our fixed costs are recovered via the flat component of the rate or the volumetric component of the rate, the same as all of our other rate schedules. And as we'll talk about a little bit later, depending on how much, where you put those fixed costs, how much you emphasize the flat component of the rate compared to the volumetric component of the rate, that is going to affect how sensitive any rate structure is with respect to net energy metering to the saturation of customer solar. So the second rate design that we explored is very similar, but it takes a slightly different take. What it does is it says, okay, let's shift some of the cost recovery from the volumetric component of the rate back over to the flat component of the rate. So it adds a nominal $20. Again, these numbers can be whatever they need to be. We just need to ask, what are we trying to communicate? So this is just a pure hypothetical. So nominal $20, and then we adjusted the volumetric side in order to meet the revenue requirements. Now, what this rate also does is it places specific emphasis on the value of electricity exported back to the grid during the peak hours, right? So the previous rate said it was worth 18 cents, which is our current retail rate. But this one actually puts more emphasis on that peak time period. It says it's actually worth more. We're gonna value it equal to what our peak rate is, our peak consumed rate is, right? We're matching parity there. And then where the off-peak hour value, it just kind of falls where it falls based on just finding the revenues. one thing to note with this design is that the large differential between peak, off-peak for exports creates an additional opportunity for solar plus storage. Something that kind of that isn't as emphasized, still present but not as emphasized in that previous rate design, right? So all of this is just showing how different rate designs, both of these rates meet our revenue requirements, right? But they each communicate different things to our customers. So this just kind of brings it all together and shows it against the time of use rate. I think we've pretty much covered all of this. The last point to cover tonight is that the rate schedule, in addition to communicating to our customers the value of electricity, different structures are going to be more or less sensitive to the saturation of rooftop solar in our service territory. So what we did was we took that historical data from our customers, their load, their energy use profiles, and we compared the solar data to the non-solar data, and we came up with these hypothetical scenarios. And each of these hypothetical scenarios, basically, it starts at the very top with a customer with no solar generation, and then it increments in 10% increments, all the way up to the very bottom one. There is a customer with a solar system that can, solar array, that can offset 100% of their annual electricity use. We ran each of these through all of those rates that we just took, all three of those rates we just covered, right? The existing net energy metering rate and those two hypothetical rates. And we asked, we explored how sensitive are each of these rates to increased customer solar. And the plot here on the left demonstrates the results. If you look at the vertical axis there, that's the amount of revenue that we recover via the rate. The horizontal axis is the percentage of the percentage of annual electricity use offset by solar. So 100% means that the customer at the end of the year net zero. 0% means that they don't have solar at all, right? And then everything else in between. The yellow line demonstrates our current net energy metering rate and its sensitivity to rooftop solar. The horizontal line again is there it is. That's our revenue. That's revenue neutral. I mean, so anything above that line means that we're collecting what we need. Anything below that line means that we're raising rates, right? The yellow line here indicates that our current net energy metering rate can support somewhere between 30 and 40% solar. Once the saturations get above that, we are no longer collecting the revenues that we need to collect. The other two rate designs, you'll note that they still eventually do drop below the line. That's going to be a characteristic of any rate that has any of the fixed costs recovered via the volumetric component. And I'm sorry, that's a really abstract thing to say. But they're much less sensitive, and they can communicate the value of the time of use of electricity in addition to the amount of electricity, as well as open up the opportunity, for example, for energy arbitrage, where customers can charge batteries during the day, sell it back to us at night at a peak price, which helps make a system of solar plus storage more economical for the customer, and such systems would be beneficial for the grid, for example. That concludes the workshop presentation. The recommendation is receive this information, provide input and direction to staff.
Stephen Keats.
It's a lot.
Yeah. That's a lot of language and numbers, and thank you. So yeah, the board, well, do we have any public comment on our discussion about our next generation customer generation rates? Ideas, concepts is where we're at. We're not taking action. Once again, this was just a workshop. We're just learning things here. We are not making decisions. We're just talking to staff about what we want. Seeing no public comment? Okay. Directors.
I do have a question, just some clarifying, just so if I understand correctly. So solar's a good thing to a certain point. If a customer generator generates enough solar for their own use, that's not a customer for the PUD anymore, right? They're not paying in because they don't need it. So at a certain point, right, if I understood from your grasp, we lose those customers. And we have to have a certain baseline to generate revenue. Am I sort of?
It's a little bit more nuanced because customers aren't, just because on an annual basis they might be net zero, throughout the year they're still utilizing the grid. They are pulling electricity, for example, in the middle of the night, the sun's not shining, it's not producing, their solar panels aren't producing any electricity. And so during those periods of times, the customers are importing electricity from the grid. They're using electricity, right? The question, and then during the day, they might be exporting electricity because they're generating excess of what they personally need. The question comes down to what is the value of a unit of electricity that is exported from the customer compared to a unit of electricity that they bring in. In a crude sense, one could compare it between wholesale and retail in a kind of a economic context. And so throughout there, we're not losing those customers by any means. They're still utilizing the grid, and the question is how to equitably distribute the cost, because there's a cost associated with them using the grid. I think an example that I was actually thinking about earlier today is that if I'm driving my car, even if I put my car in reverse, I'm still putting miles on my car and the associated maintenance that go with that, right? So a customer, even though they are feeding the grid in reverse, it's still putting wear and tear on the grid and the components, and it does add, once that solar exceeds a certain point, it will add complexities in terms of managing and operating and maintaining the grid, and eventually there will be additional infrastructure that'll need to be put in place. So there is a cost associated with their use, even though maybe at the end of the year it kind of becomes, from an accounting standpoint, net zero. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, there's just some clarity. That was a really good presentation. I really enjoyed that. I learned quite a bit from that, so that was great. But I as I was listening, I thought, so is there incentive for solar from a company perspective or not? So anyway, thank you for the clarity for that.
Thank you, Director Morrell. Do we have any other thoughts or goals that the board would like to articulate? I'm looking at, okay. I know, I'm looking at Tony. I'm going to look at you because I felt that was a little Tony. Now, Jeff and, okay. Any, so you can say no, you can say.
Digesting a lot of information, and something, we need to really think more so when we reach that 5% of the peak, or have we done that?
We have
we've already
surpassed
done
that.
We're
okay.
at about 2,000 kW of installed capacity, which is sitting, I don't know, probably around 5.5%.
Oh, okay. So we're already there.
This is why we have
Yeah.
the opportunity to have this conversation, is because we did fulfill that first goal of the original NEM,
Yeah.
which we're no longer saying, but we did do that. So that has freed us up to revisit
Customer
our solar,
generation.
yeah, our customer generation, exactly.
Rates.
What our thoughts are moving forward on that.
Energy's not free,
It's not free, no matter
regardless of the direction.
Well, we still have to maintain, the roads and in this case, the wires and the transmitters and the substations and the all the things that are involved in moving those electrons around. The electrons themselves are, however they're generated, some very cheaply on your own rooftop, some less so and further away. I think that we do have to evolve our rate structure with solar to sort of meet our modern goals. These are the goals that, when this was first brought about in California 30 years ago, it was because we really needed to jumpstart an industry to help us out of our dependency on fossil fuels, right? But that industry is well and truly launched now. It is, standing on its own 2 feet. It doubled in the last 3 years, and if we can see that, we're doing a great job of growing solar. And now I think we need to shift our focus to the things that are going to benefit, again, this community as a whole. Distributed resources like solar, now it's become very important to pair them with battery storage because we're looking at our peaks, and whether you've got solar or not, the peak is the same. It's all at dusk, the sun goes down, and we're all cooking dinner. So we still have to buy that much energy, and it's, if we have somehow incentives in place to help people store their solar energy where we can utilize it more effectively when we, as a whole community, need it, and to be able to do that equitably so that we are not, that your neighbor's not paying for the electricity that you use.
Right,
And,
that, I was just
that's
thinking
the-
that, it's like, okay, we gotta make sure that people with solar aren't getting a free ride.
That's
And
exactly
then the people
right.
without solar are paying for all that stuff. So there's a big, that's
That's what I think is a really
we
important.
need to be fair.
We need to be fair.
Yeah.
We need to be fair. And so whatever that ultimately looks like, I mean, that's what my feedback would be, is that I really want us to make sure that we are equitable in how we spread our costs out. I don't want to discourage solar. I want to continue to support people who, for their reasons, philosophically, hopefully, because they're environmentally conscious or they want to be self-sufficient, but it shouldn't be because they want to make money selling electricity to the PUD, because that's just not, that's not right. And that shouldn't be your reasoning. So that would be my feedback. That's what I will be looking for in a final rate redesign, and whatever tools that we use to help people change whatever it is, their patterns, their usage patterns, how we shave things off peak, how we use batteries, how we, as a community, use our energy resources most effectively and fairly. So, yeah. Okay. Well, that was fun. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Second workshop in the books. Which brings us to, I think, our final action item of the evening, our only action item of the evening, item number 11, we're going backwards now, which is resolution number 2025-16, approving the district's new employment agreement for the general manager. And
Good evening, President Finn, members of the board. Jillian Stewart, HR and Risk Director, here to present action item number 11. Background on this item: the general manager of the district reports directly to the board of directors. District Code Section 2.48.010, the general manager shall be employed by the board of directors at a salary established by the board. The board shall work with the general manager to set performance goals and objectives. And consideration of increase in compensation within the district's approved wage and salary plan will be given at that time. The district's current employment agreement with the general manager became effective July 3rd, 2021, and is set to expire July 2nd of this year. The general manager employment agreement establishes conditions of employment, outlines requirements for performance evaluations, and sets terms for compensation and benefits. Public Utility Code, Section 16111, establishes that the officers of the district, other than the board of directors, are the general manager, the district clerk, accountant, and treasurer. Public Utility Code, Section 16112, establishes that officers of the district, other than the board of directors, shall be appointed by the board, hold office at its pleasure, and receive such compensation as is provided for by the board by ordinance. At the district's regularly scheduled meeting held on May 7, 2025, the board of directors held a public hearing for the consideration of adopting ordinance number 2025-01, approving the process for appointing and establishing compensation for officers of the district via resolution. In a regularly scheduled meeting held on March 12, 2025, the Board of Directors approved the district's 2025 unrepresented wage schedule in accordance with District Code and the California Public Employees Retirement System, or CalPERS, administrative requirements. Approved wage schedule includes a salary range for the general manager of $286,834.20 to $348,648.77. Resolution 2025-16, which we're presenting tonight, approves the updated general manager employment agreement with an annual salary within the board-approved salary range. The general manager's compensation package that is in your board packet today includes a base salary of $328,000, a cost of living adjustment of 2.5% annually, a merit performance bonus opportunity of up to 5% of his base salary, a vehicle allowance of $900 a month, increasing with IRS mileage rates, and other benefits such as medical, dental, time off are the same as our other management and unrepresented staff. The FY 2024-2025 water and electric utility operating budgets assumed increased employee wages and compensation based upon annual inflationary forecast. The fiscal year 24 year-end operating reserves balance of $10.7 million electric and $7 million water are both sufficient to fund the variances to the budget for negotiated fiscal year 25 labor costs. Fiscal year 26-27 budget cycles for both utilities will account for the changes to all labor cost adjustments. So our recommendation tonight is for the board to adopt resolution number 2025-16, approving the district's new employment agreement with the general manager.
Thank you, Jillian. Do we have any public comment on this item? Seeing none. Do we have any directors' comments or questions on this item?
Happy to continue Brian's contract.
Okay, good comment.
No, I just want to reiterate that we spent considerable time and several meetings, not with the board as well as with appointed negotiators, and so we arrived at this through a process. So.
Yeah. Indeed. Okay. Does anybody want to make a motion?
I'll move approval, move to adopt resolution number 2025-16, approving the district's new employment agreement with the general manager.
Thank you. Do we
I'll
have a
second.
second? Beautiful. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Nope. And the motion passes.
Awesome.
And I believe that is all of our open session business for the evening, which means we're going to be moving into closed session, item number 14, as is spelled out on the agenda.
Great.
And think, moving on.
Thank you.
Let's take a 5-minute break, though, before we head into the closed room.